While the Grendel Armada seemed focused on the conquest of Feroz, the York pirates of Attar seemed to be committed to their raids against Imperial trade ships. The recent raids on Droth Traig and Mayreeve have enraged the Salt Lords, however. All the reports confirm that they are offering significant bounties for every Imperial vessel captured or sunk. The Grendel control of the Bay of Katazar may not be as complete as it once was, but it cannot be denied that the Empire has struggled to prevent them from having a significant impact on merchant ships based along the southern coasts. Still, in their overconfidence, they seem to have become a little overextended. In spite of all the evidence to the contrary, they seem to have an arrogant certainty that they are still the masters of the sea, despite of 2 crushing raids against their coast. They continue to assume that while the Empire has the advantage on land, they control the seas. This season, the Empire resolved to teach them a hard lesson, that they are no longer uncontested masters of the Bay of Katazar. Most of the coordination of the Imperial fleets took place at Anvil. With the attack agreed, most of the Imperial captains simply gathered in ports across the bay, find other captains they can work with and put to sea. Ships from every Imperial nation are represented. The largest single contribution comes from the Brass Coast, unsurprisingly, but there is also a sizable contingent of vessels from Highguard, Navarre and the League. Many of the ship's crews have been granted magical boons to help them in their task of hunting and destroying Grendel ships. The enchantments of Spring prove particularly popular, although this is not without its own concerns. Crews bearing the mark of Spring magic often experience a drive to act without consideration of the consequences, and some revel in the urge to take whatever they want. It is no surprise that ships whose crews feel particularly uninhibited about using violence against anyone who gets in their way are often encouraged to get themselves under sail as soon as possible rather than hanging around the docks of Surok, Sarvos or Crown's Key. Other captains have favoured the less violent but undeniably powerful enchantments of summer. Infused with power supported by the eternal Rhiannos, these crew need no urging to set sail. They feel the draw of new vistas, the urge to explore places they have never seen before, and the certainty that great things await them on the high seas if they are just brave enough to seek them out. There is a paradox at the heart of this enchantment. For all that it grants to crews who sail under its bottomless reserves of confidence and bolsters their naval skills, it also bends the skew of fate, so their ships encounter more obstacles, greater threats, or the more opportunities for adventure. Regardless of whether they bear enchantments, the Imperial ships united in a single cause, to hunt down Grendel ships and capture or destroy them by any means. Given that the Grendel themselves are busy seeking out the fat merchant vessels of Imperial traders, some captains sensibly surmise that they should just shadow each vessel and simply wait for the Orcs to turn up, which they do in large numbers, expecting easy pickings or at worst a few escorting combat-ready vessels. Easily overwhelmed, the Grendel pirates are taken completely by surprise when they encounter zealous warships itching for a chance to engage them in life-or-death combat. Worse for the Orcs, when they try to disengage, the privateers simply abandon the merchant ships that they are notionally escorting and give chase. Time and again across the bay, Imperial escorts clash with Grendel pirates. Those that flee are run to ground, those that stand and fight are sunk or crippled and boarded. League and Marcher captains in particular favour this practical approach. Some fleets actively hunt the privateers, attacking them when they feel safe. The freeborn are true masters of this strategy, drawing on centuries of experience playing seagull and crab games with the Grendel from one end of the bay to the other. Often they're able to take the Grendel ships by surprise, crippling their sails or breaking their oars before they can even react. Lone Grendel ships are a particularly easy prey for freeborn corsairs. Over time the Orcs learn, however, and begin clustering together into larger groups, the better to fight off the Imperial ships hunting them across the waves. Unfortunately for the Grendel, this makes it easy for the corsairs and their allies to find them. A number of ships turn the Grendel tactics back on them. These vessels, a significant number of whom hail from Frusca and Navarre, hunt Grendel's merchant ships rather than privateers. The York trading vessels are built to transport cargo not for speed or war. They are generally escorted by a couple of more martially suited ships, but they often struggle to outrun Imperial warships. It is a challenge to identify the trading routes these ships prefer. They tend to avoid broad western channels between Iron Confederacy and Tathar, meaning that captains who wish to prey on these rich ships must risk diving deeper into Grendel-held waters on the eastern side of Attar. More adventurous ship captains target the heavily guarded supply routes supporting the Grendel Armada in Feroz. This is no endeavour for the faint-hearted. Rather than being made up solely of undisciplined orc privateers of the Broken Shore, the supply ships are generally guarded by serious Grendel warships, crewed by as many hard-bitten, combat-ready marines as by simple sailors. Attacking such convoys require plenty of organisation, preparation, planning, and ships. The Highborn and Urizen ships prove particularly adept at executing these raids. While they're able to claim few supplies directly, almost half of the supply convoys on the Bay of Catazar this season are sent to the bottom. As the season draws on, the Grendel reinforce their convoys with naval vessels and the raids cease to be practical. Yet there is a cost to the Grendel. The need for stronger escorts mean that they must perforce cut the number of convoys significantly, meaning that the naval forces on the other side of the bay will find it much harder to resupply. The more adventurous captains seek out opportunities to raid the actual towns and pirate coves along the bay that the pirates call home. Ships belonging to Winterfolk, Dornish and Imperial Orc captains seem especially drawn to these risky attacks. Lightning raids against Ireed and Sheil accumulate in an attack against the prosperous Grendel port of Gainmichdove under the very guise of the powerful Salt Lord Ashur himself. Gainmichdove occupies a position partway between Bayore and Davidgrove in terms of size, but its citizens are much closer to the wild barbarians of the Broken Shore than the notionally civilized people of the late Salt Lord Shuriad's old estate. The raid results in significant damage to the harbour, with 24 Grendel pirate ships being set aflame before they even weigh anchor. The Empire is not entirely alone in its endeavour. About a month after the spring equinox, a small fleet of black-sailed warships arrive at Cran's Quay, escorting a convoy of Axos merchant vessels. Several of the ships are clearly enchanted, swirling fog coils around the hulls of some, while ghostly figures drift and filter around the riggings of some of the others. Their crews report several run-ins with pirates, which they've run. Their leader is Capitanos Electra Nakamos of Contour, a fiery woman with curly ram horns and an uncompromising manner, who speaks of a loose alliance of almost a dozen Axos captains. Here at the invitation of the ambassador, they are keen to participate in securing the Bay of Catazar and teaching the Grendel a definitive lesson. The ships stick together, ranging up and down the eastern coast of the bay, sinking Grendel ships wherever possible, occasionally joining up with Imperial ships to attack particularly well-defended targets. While a major force of Imperial captains is united in their goal of dominating the bay, they never quite reached a critical mass that would allow them to attack the Temple of Tempest Jade or disrupt the bloody and brutal rites of spring. Indeed, in the final months before the summer solstice, it becomes significantly more dangerous to hunt Grendel pirates. The rites this year have by all accounts been especially bloody, and a record number of orc ships now bear potent blessings of spring magic. While some are identifiably enchanted with the same magic the Empire favours, a ritual similar to blood and salt, others bear more potent enchantments. Specifically, a number of orc captains appear to have been granted the favour of Shiaka herself. Giant sea monsters accompany their ships as they begin to launch raids of their own against the Imperial fleet captains. The Empire still has the upper hand, although it is becoming increasingly necessary for independent captains to coordinate their actions for fear of being caught by a much larger force of Grendel ships. Luckily, the reliance of pirates on spring magic means they find it even harder than usual to coordinate with each other or engage in complex planning, which proves to be a valuable advantage to the Empire. Unfortunately, while the Broken Shore pirates embrace spring magic, their Grendel overlords clearly favour a much less chaotic enchantment. As the summer solstice draws closer, purple-sailed Grendel warships, often flying the colours of one Salt Lord or another, begin a more coordinated sweep across the southern and eastern coast of the bay. Rather than savage bloodletting or monstrous beasts, they bear signs of magic that help them track enemy ships over greater distances, or twist a skein of fate to allow them to come upon raiding vessels at just the worst possible time for the Empire. That said, the Grendel cannot ignore the message that they've been sent. Hundreds of their ships have been sunk or crippled or sent fleeing back to safe havens with their sails in tatters. Their safe havens have been exposed as nowhere near as safe as they might have wished. They cannot fail to have learnt that their control of the bay is no longer uncontested, and that their attacks on Imperial trade ships will no longer be tolerated. Their invasion of the Brass Coast continues, but they must now weigh the difficulties of getting their supply convoys across the bay in the face of Imperial opposition. Their piracy may continue, but the days where they simply pick off the juiciest prizes as they saw fit are over. It's likely that the Salt Lords are very angry with the Empire right now. Game information. Bay of Katazar. While the Empire gathered significant force to meet the 30,000 strength threshold, there was not significant support to reach the final tier and disrupt the rites of spring. Still, this represents a significant victory for the Empire over the Grendel. They have certainly made the Bay of Katazar a more dangerous environment for Grendel orcs. The penalties suffered by Imperial trading vessels operating from the ports along the Bay of Katazar have been removed for the foreseeable future. While the Grendel will still be a threat, they are significantly less confident in their approach and will return to opportunistic attacks against trading ships rather than actively hunting them. The Grendel pirates will likely find other ways to cause trouble, but just as the earlier action caused them to lose interest in interfering with fishing fleet, so they will turn their attention away from ships trading via the Bay of Katazar. Raids against coastal settlements dominated by Grendel pirates, specifically Sha'il and Ireed, have provided a bounty of 12 wains of mithril and 6 rings of ilium. These resources have been collected by the Imperial Fleet Master. Imperial ships have inflicted significant damage on international trade undertaken by the Salt Lords, sinking, seizing or crippling a number of trading vessels heading for Asavea, Sorkovan and Yarm. The threat to Grendel supply convoy means that for the next year, Grendel navies will find it harder to resupply. They will only be able to benefit from natural or emergency resupply within a territory they control. Furthermore, the rates of natural resupply when they are in their own territories will be halved. Participation. Bay of Katazar. This has not been a simple raid against a static target, but a campaign of attacks back and forth across the Bay of Katazar, many of them quite risky in nature. As a consequence, every fleet that has taken part in the action is assumed to have sustained some damage. The game effect is that each fleet suffers a -2 penalty of its production, equivalent to 40 points of effective strength, for the next 6 months. You are free to roleplay the form that this damage takes as you see fit. It might be actual damage to your ship or ships, dead or depleted crew, or even that your crew has taken some time off to carouse away the wealth that they have accrued.